Hello, super quick intro. Today I'm going to be showing you how you can solve the Hanayama UFO puzzle. Now this is going to take a little bit of a while. There is quite a lot of explaining to do, especially about those 4 ball pieces, which we'll go through in a second. Now there is going to be a little bit of trial and error. I will also explain how that will work as we go along. Bear in mind this is a very tricky puzzle to get apart, so it will take a little bit of practice for some of the moves. There will be some frustration probably on your part, but stick with it. You will eventually solve the UFO puzzle and it will be worth the wait when you do. Let's get straight into it. So here we have a fully assembled UFO puzzle. Now before we get into it, I'm going to describe these 2 outside pieces as shell pieces, and the 4 bits that make up the ball on the inside are going to be the ball pieces, and they're also numbered, which will make more sense in a second. So what we're going to do first is I need you to know that this circle in the shell piece, the side that has the UFO and the Hanayama engraving, is a bigger circle than the non-engraved blank circle side. Now what that means is that we are going to be focusing on this big circle because the first couple of moves involve getting 2 of these ball pieces out through this circle. But before we do that, we need to get the order right of these 4 pieces. And before we know how to order them, we're going to have a look at the inside of these pieces so that it makes a little bit more sense as to what we're aiming for when we're trying to get one of these pieces out. Okay, so if we have a look at the 4 pieces that make up the ball inside the 2 shell pieces, you'll notice that they are labeled 1, 2 and 3, and they are labeled because these 3 numbered pieces are shaped slightly differently. So if we look at this number 3 piece first, you'll notice that on the outside there is a big metal border going around the entire piece, where if we compare that to the number 2 pieces, these 2 pieces are labeled number 2, they're both exactly the same. You'll see that there's no border on the outside of these 2 pieces, and there's a short border on the inside on one side, and there's a big high border on the opposite side. And this other number 2 piece is exactly the same, but this number 1 piece has no border on the outside and also 2 short borders on the inside. And this number 1 piece is the bit that we need to get in the right position, as well as these other 3 pieces, because this number 1 piece is the bit that's coming out of the shell first. And how we do that is because of the order of all these other pieces, or all 4 pieces essentially. So what we want to do is get the border, the big border of the number 3 piece, adjacent to the high borders of the number 2 pieces on each side. And what happens when we get in this position is that we get a pretty much smooth gap in there for that number 1 piece to slide off. So if we're in this position, it's the number 1 piece then has no borders to cross with and just slides on and off in this position. If we compare that to switching the number 2 pieces around so that the high inside borders are not adjacent to the number 3 piece, you'll see that there's a slight now barrier for that number 1 piece to get over. These inside borders block that number 1 piece from sliding off. And it'd be even worse if we had the number 3 piece adjacent to the number 1 piece as well. Because if we look down in this position, you'll see that that outside border is getting in the way massively. So what we need to do is get the high borders of the number 2 pieces, these pieces here, next to the number 3 piece, so that we've got all the big borders out of the way so that this number 1 piece can slide on and off from there. Now that we know what it looks like on the inside of these 4 ball pieces, the question is, how do we get them in the right order? And the short answer is, it's just trial and error. But what we can do to help that trial and error is identify that number 3 piece, the piece with the big outside borders. And to do that, all we need to do is open up the square in the middle. And you might not be able to see this on the camera, but I can see that the number 3 piece is here. So I'm going to have that at the bottom for this first move. And for the other 3 pieces, it's very hard, if not impossible, to identify which is a number 2 and which is a number 1, and which way around those number 2 high border and low borders are. So we're just going to assume that we're just going to trial and error our way to the right combination. So we know that this is the number 3 piece. Now, to get the number 1 piece out, I have found that the easiest way is to use gravity. So what we are going to do is we're going to bring, again, this is the 3 piece, this is the number 1 piece, or what we hope is the number 1 piece. We're going to bring the corner down to this lip on the shell here, and then we're just going to tilt it on its side so that we're using gravity. And then all I'm going to do is just place 1 finger on what I hope is the number 1 piece and just wiggle it side to side, and it just happens, or so happens, that this is the right piece. And what happens when you've got the right piece is that the number 1 piece comes over that lip of the shell, and all you then have to do is just wiggle it around and take it out from there. Now let's assume that that wasn't the right piece, that it didn't come over that lip. All we then need to do is try one of the other 3 possible combinations of getting the order of these 3 pieces right. So let's assume that that wasn't right. All I'm going to do is keep the number 3 piece exactly where it is, and I'm just going to rotate these 2 pieces around. So we swapped those pieces side to side, and then I'm going to do exactly the same. I'm going to bring the corner down to the lip of the shell. I'm going to tilt it so we're using gravity. I'm going to use 1 finger and just wiggle it side to side, and you'll notice that nothing happens because I know that this is now the wrong combination. Let's assume that both the combinations that we've tried are wrong. What we then need to do is flip around these 2 pieces for that 3rd out of 4 possible combinations and do the same thing. Bring the corners to the lip, use gravity, and use that finger, wiggle it side to side. If it doesn't happen, then we need to change to the last combination, which is swapping these 2 pieces around as well. And we know for a fact now, because the other 3 in theory weren't the right position, that this one's definitely the right position. So again, corner, wiggle, and it should come out from there. For me, I know that that first position was the right position, so I'm going to move each piece back to that original place. And then again, I'm just going to do those same moves. This is the number 3. These 2 I now know are the number 2 pieces with the high borders adjacent to the number 3 piece. And I know that this is the number 1 piece, and it is free to come out of this gap with the engraving, UFO and Hanayama side. So we're going to bring it down to the lip. We're going to use gravity. We're going to wiggle our finger, and it falls out from there. Once we've got that number 1 piece out, we can now see inside the puzzle, and we can see that we definitely got it right. And all we need to now do is do that same thing for one of the number 2 pieces to get it out of this circle. It's a little bit, it can be more fidgety to get this number 2 piece out because there's more positions for the 3 remaining ball pieces to move around. But all we need to do is stop them moving around like they are doing. Get that number 2 piece to the shell, to the edge or to the lip of the shell, wiggle it with a finger on top and take it out from there. And what you can do for the last 2 pieces is exactly the same thing. You can take it out of the gap, but it's much easier if you just move them around and get them in the right position for the shell pieces to just come over the top of each other. And it's much easier to separate all the pieces like that. And that is quite a long-winded explanation of how you disassemble the UFO puzzle. And to reassemble the UFO puzzle, we are going to take one of the shell pieces, the bit with the Hanayama engraving on. We're going to put the number 3 piece in there. We're going to put the number 2 piece in there with the high side next to the number 3 piece, because we want to make it as easy as possible to get that number 1 piece by putting them in the right order to start with, because it will save us a job later on. Once we've got those 2 pieces in, we're going to reassemble the 2 shell pieces. If they get stuck at any point, just move those bottom pieces around and then they should slide together nice and easily. And now what we can do is, because we can see the inside of these 2 pieces now, we can make sure that we put the number 2 piece in the right position, which is going to be in here. Now I've found that putting the pieces back in is easier from a side on position, and then sliding the pieces in from there, and making sure that you're putting it next to the right piece. So this number 2 piece, the high side, we'll put in alongside the number 3 piece. And when that is in position there, we can then, we already know that they're in the right position here. And again, it's much easier from a side on position, the number 1 piece just sliding in from there, and we have reassembled the UFO puzzle. So there we go. It's quite a long-winded explanation, but I feel like understanding the mechanics of those 4 ball pieces helps you then to figure out, right, this is what I'm trying to do, and makes it easier to achieve in the end. Hopefully I did that. Hopefully you have now solved the UFO puzzle for yourself. If you do run into any trouble, or you just want to ask a question about the puzzle at all, please comment below. I will help out as much as I possibly can. And thank you very much for being here. If you want to see me struggle through the UFO puzzle for the first time, or if you want to see some step-by-step solutions to all these other Hanayama puzzles, then click my face here to subscribe, and I will see you next time. Peace!